Hello, beloveds. Welcome to the Amanda Collins podcast. It's my honor to help you awaken to joy, be your greatest self, and live a life you love. I'm Amanda Collins. Each week, I'll share tips, practices, and rituals to help you feel the storehouse of joy inside. I'll answer your questions and talk with thought leaders from around the world about health, wealth, love, conscious living, and parenting. Are you ready to live your most fulfilled life? Welcome to episode 48. What you'll learn during this amazing interview: common mistakes made in relationships, what to do if you're frightened of losing yourself in it, how to feel safe being vulnerable and really showing up, what to do if your partner is emotionally shut down, embracing and understanding that you both have different needs, what to do when you get triggered, are you always blaming your partner, and how to really own your own stuff in a relationship, conflict resolutions, and so much more. Jayson Gaddis is a relationship student, teacher, author, and host of the Smart Couple podcast and founder of the Relationship School. He is on a mission to teach people the one class they didn't get in school: how to do intimate relationships. That's why he founded the Relationship School. He was emotionally constipated for years before relationship failure forced him to turn his life over to learning about relationships. Now he's married to his amazing wife since 2007 and has 2 beautiful kids. Hello, and I am beyond excited to welcome an amazing guest today, Jayson Gaddis. I have been listening to his podcast for a long time, the Smart Couple podcast, and he has the most amazing relationship school, and I'd love for you to share more about that. But I can't wait to get stuck in, because this wisdom and knowledge that you share is so needed in the world. Jayson, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
So I'd love to get stuck right in. And I love your mission statement on your website. I help you take your relationship pain and turn it into love. So that's what's needed on so many levels. So I'd love to get stuck into what started you on this path of wanting to facilitate this kind of healing and love on the planet.
Yeah, thanks. Pain, really. Pain is a huge driver for me and probably most people, that we're a little stubborn, right? I just was blaming every woman I dated. And finally, after many, many failed relationships in my 20s, I realized, I kind of woke up and was like, well, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe because I'm the one common denominator in all these failures. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. And I committed from that day forward to learning everything I could about relationship.
I love that. And, it's not something we're taught in school. And, it all depends on what type of environment that we're raised in to witness relationship within those closest, as in our parents and everything. So the first thing I'd love to ask is how to feel safe in relationship, because you've got an amazing blog and podcasts and incredible information. But that's the first thing. Like, how do we feel safe in relationship? What are some of the main guidance that you give us there?
It really is vital to open our hearts and our bodies to another person, is we need to feel safe. And so to me, it's a need. It's a primary need. A lot of people have then challenges with the word need. Well, you have needs. If you're listening to this, you have needs. And in relationship, one of your primary needs is to feel safe, especially in a partnership. Because when you feel safe, you can explore and open your body. Create safety are someone treating us with respect, someone being kind to us, someone seeing us in our pain and validating our experience and not making us wrong for having an emotional upset. So there's a number of things we can do to help another person feel safe. And the easiest way to think about it, Amanda, is just to think about if you're a parent, or if you have nieces or nephews, or if you've been around young children, it's like, in a kid's crying, it's like, what does that kid need to feel emotionally safe right now? And it's fairly intuitive what that kid needs. We move closer, we talk in a kind voice, we maybe reach out to physically put our hand on their shoulder or pick them up off the ground. Those kind of things are common sense and intuitive to us, but in a partnership, for some reason, they go out the window and it's harder. But it's that type of care and attention we need to have to create safety.
Absolutely. And I think, as far as, it's like there should be a preparation before, you go into marriage or a long-term relationship. And probably the first thing is kind of work on our own self-love and our own self-acceptance, because usually it's, how we're feeling internally that shows up in the relationship. So how does one start with kind of that inner journey, or even simultaneously while working on that journey while being in a relationship?
Yeah, well, I'm a big proponent of for the self-love people to promote self-love, and I'm a big fan of self-love, and I think we need that. But to do that in isolation is really challenging. It's because babies don't learn to love themselves in isolation. They caregivers. So while we're not little babies in our adult life, we can take notes from that and just go, oh, right, it's actually through my friendships. Let's say I'm single, through my friendships and my closest relationships, that's where I learn to love and embrace myself. I could go meditate on a mountain, and the person who is in relationship with other people is going to learn to love themselves quicker than the person meditating on the mountain, in my judgment. I tried meditation for years. It was awesome. But so we have to learn how, because we bump up against other people and we see where we judge ourselves, where we judge them, where we contract, and where we run away and we play small. All these are places where we need to learn to embrace ourselves. Mm-hmm. So relationship is the kind of the very place that activates us and shows us where we're not loving ourselves. And then we can do a number of things to learn to accept that part of ourselves.
I love that. And it is like the quickest way to enlightenment is through relationship, because it's just like they're like this amazing mirror. And I was reading through all the amazing information on your website, and you have this one great blog, and it's all about the most common relationship mistakes. And I love that it's like once the beer goggles come off and that unbelievable, chemistry, and there's this expectation of this fairy tale relationship, it's like, and then they live happily ever after. And right. And then that reality of, oh my goodness, as you said, the beer goggles have worn off, and it's like the reality of the day-to-day relationship. My husband and I are together 16 years, and we have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So,
nice.
Yeah. And, but then there's like the layers of when the children come in and the shifts in dynamics in the relationship. So I'd love if you could maybe speak to us about that. So you were talking about the main relationship mistakes, but then what are they, and then how can we work around those?
Yeah, well, you named the biggest one there, which is that we subscribe usually unconsciously and kind of because of our conditioning to a fantasy and a fairy tale about how they work. And we need to crack that fantasy and wake up out of that sleepiness into reality. And reality suggests that every relationship has conflict and challenge. And so having the right view is really important. And the view is that relationship is a path to growth, to wholeness, to awakening, to being ourselves, to freedom, to an interconnectedness that is incredible. So it's a path. So having that view, and then the mindset is that of a warrior, that I'm going to embrace the challenges. I'm going to embrace conflict and learn how to deal with it and stop making the other person wrong or myself wrong and stop running away. And realize that conflict's just a part of life. Look everywhere. Look in nature. Most of your relationships in your own life, if they're good, experience conflict at times. And that's not you just need to learn how to work with it. So another step is that we need to learn how to embrace it and educate ourselves. And that's why, again, partly I created the relationship school, because we're not formally taught how to do this. So we rely on childhood strategies and patterns to get us through stressful times. And that just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't work. Most people know that. So, but then they won't educate themselves. So we really need an education formally on how they work and how we work in a relationship. Because most of us act like kids when we get hurt, or we act out, or we do lots of things. And none of this is a problem, again, if you have a bigger view. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, we can have a sense of humor about it even, how we show up. but it's going to be a little easier if we're learning along the way.
Absolutely. And would you say that a lot of the time, the pain that we have from whatever our childhood experience was, or that we tend to magnetize somebody that, has a very similar pain or trigger. So, there's that kind of understanding of each other's pain. And when that happens and that arises, and as you said, we act like children, and what we really want is that connection and that closeness. Tell us about how we handle conflict. Like, what do we do when that arises? Well, what's the steps?
Yeah. So if you have the right attitude, we don't run away. We go, oh, right, this is that thing that's uncomfortable and stressful and I don't like, but I don't need to run away like a scared animal. I can stay here. I might need to take space, but I can stay here and breathe and learn how to do it differently. I don't need to turn into a 7-year-old again or into my mean parent and make my partner wrong. So we can just slow down, and slowing down is going to go really, really well if we can do it. Animal brain, which is our hind brain, gets activated. We just act in ways that we later might regret. So slowing down is really key. You can call a timeout. That's one of my favorite ones. Just say, timeout, honey, hold on. Hey, hold on a second. Timeout. I just need to take some breaths. Whew, this is really intense for me. Or if you don't have words, because that's more of your orientation, because it's hard for you to even speak during conflict, you might at least do a timeout signal. You might educate your partner ahead of time. Hey, when we go into conflict, it's really hard for me to talk. And I just need you to know this about me. And it sometimes takes me an hour or 2 hours or the next day until I can articulate myself. And I need you to give me some space. So we can have really collaborative conversations before the conflict, certainly. And when we're in it, we can do things like time out. We can move toward our partner in a non-threatening way to just be like, hey, hold on. I just want us to calm down for a second. And believe it or not, eye contact is one of the ways to calm yourself down, is to move closer to the person you're arguing with and look right in their eyes. Because there's something that happens in the human animal. When we do that, we're less likely to scream, we're less likely to yell, we're less likely to treat our partner with disrespect, or just treat ourselves with disrespect. We can just move in, and it's that can calm a person down. But it goes against what you want to do in the moment, which is to run away.
Mm-hmm. So it's really like, I'm committed, and even if this is hard, painful, I'm scared. I suppose even just sharing that in the moment. And you were saying space. Sometimes it's a couple of deep breaths, or it's like, I need a bit of space, and maybe it's even the next day. But what would you suggest for when the partner's like no, now, like, I really need to have this conversation now, but the other one is kind of needing space? How would you handle that?
Yeah, well, if we're in a partnership, we're going to respect that you need space, that it takes you longer, and I'm not going to make you wrong for that. And if someone's got a real sense of urgency, usually that sense of urgency is coming from a triggered kind of wound around feeling abandoned if you don't speak to me. And it's activating all my stuff that I grew up with my mom, who she would just give me the silent treatment. And so we have to investigate, is this really urgent? Like, is someone going to die here? Is it that big of a deal to wait an hour or a few minutes? Now, we want to repair as soon as possible. So repairing quickly is something that, brain research is showing us is vital, actually, to be able to repair fast. But sometimes we're with a partner who is slower, and slower meaning it just takes their brain and their nervous system a little while to be able to articulate a thought or come out of it. So if I'm with someone like that, then I want to have compassion and care and understand how they operate and educate myself on how they operate under stress. And so if I know this ahead of time, I know that, oh yeah, right, you tend to get quiet, I tend to get anxious, and our work is to slow down. Mine is to give you space, and yours is to challenge yourself to come forward sooner than you normally would. And we work this again as a team, and when it's a team process, just like farming the fields, we're both doing the work. There's no one sitting on the sidelines while the other person does the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the more pre-prep work, like just understanding and knowing each other. And I think it comes to being willing to be really vulnerable, and like, this is the most scary thing in the world. If you shut down or you walk away or you come to me and need to talk to me in that moment, I suppose it's just being able to be completely real and vulnerable, and then that's where trust comes in. And
I mean, you mentioned several things there that are important. Trust, number one, is important. If I don't trust you on some level, because you've had an affair with me, or you've been disrespectful, or you've behaved in a way where I don't feel safe, it's going to actually be hard for me to be vulnerable, and it's going to be hard for us to have conflict. So trust is a really important thing, that we establish a foundation of trust, mutual trust, so that we can have conflict, so that we can get through conflict, so that we can be vulnerable, as you suggest. And that is a beautiful move if we're up for it. If we can let our guard down and be vulnerable, that's incredibly disarming for the other person. But a lot of us get scared to the point where our wall is up, our armor's on, and it's the last thing we want to do is to drop our weapons, so to speak, and face our partner. But that's the fastest way. And then another thing I might do is just take responsibility for my part, which is, yes, I raised my voice. Yes, I shut you out. Yes, I talked disrespectfully to you. Yes, I didn't return your text. To own it. So many people want to defend themselves, and that doesn't get anywhere. So if you have the capacity in the front part of your brain to be able to own your behavior where you made a mistake, that's going to also help the repair go smoother.
Absolutely. And I think it's, again, the more kind of work you've done in self-acceptance, and really knowing yourself and knowing the pain and having worked on your stuff. And I think, to some extent, no matter how much growth we do and self-work, there's always going to be that old pain on some level there. So it's knowing ourselves and then just giving ourselves permission to kind of show up and, I suppose, be vulnerable and allow ourselves to be held as well. Because it sounds like no matter what you're saying, it's coming back to just showing up and being present with our partner and ourselves.
Yeah. The commitment is to stay in it, right? To stay in the hot fire of the challenge we're going through, and not blame or run away and completely shut down and disengage. It's to, you can do that for a little bit, but as soon as possible, you want to come back. Like, let's work through this. Let's be a team here. It just goes a really long way when we can both gesture toward each other that way.
Yeah. And what are some tools that you would suggest for, people to have in place when, as you said, conflict happens, conflict arises, stress happens, whether it's health, financial, children not being well, just not feeling great, run down, whatever it is, these stresses arise. And then if we have things in place, but let's say the conflict starts and we're kind of in disharmony where we'd rather not, like, what are some other ways other than kind of breathing, getting space, eye contact, which I totally agree with as well. It's kind of this primal thing. It like resets our nervous system. And it also is like, I see you, I see you're the one that I love. It's like when you just gaze into each other's eyes, it's almost like, what were we arguing about again?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So another tool at the relationship school, one is, we have a series of tools under our REAL communication model, and that REAL stands for Relational Empathy, Awareness, and Literacy, REAL. One of them is LUFU. We do a lot of acronyms here. LUFU, LUFU, and it stands for Listening Until the Other Person Feels Understood. And I learned this the hard way with my wife, when for years I would just defend myself. No, I understand you. And she'd be like, no, you don't. And I'd be like, yes, I do. And we'd be arguing about that now. I realized that was an incredible waste of time. So I finally said, oh, how about this? Like, I don't understand you until you feel understood. Deal? And we sort of moved in that direction, and it went a lot better. And listening until the other person feels understood is talk, and teaching them how to talk to you in a way that's not a 10-minute long monologue about everything you've done wrong. It's titrating it with some space and saying, hold on, honey, I want to make sure I understand you so far. So I'm allowed to interrupt you. And I can say, wait, is this what you're saying? Did I do this wrong or that wrong? And she says, yeah, it was this thing. And I say, okay, so got it. So tell me more. Am I understanding you so far? So we check in and get a shared reality that I'm listening. Yes. And then a key step here with listening that can be hard for some men. It certainly was for me, which is to validate. To validate someone's experience means that their experience is valid, not the case they're trying to make is right. It has nothing to do with right and wrong. If my wife is sad because of the way I've treated her, I need to have that make sense in the way I see the world. And so when I validate her, I say, it makes sense that you're sad right now, honey. And I know why. And I can say why. I can say, because I was a jerk. I raised my voice. You don't like being treated that way. So it makes sense that you're sad and you feel disconnected right now. That is magic for a woman and for really anyone that wants to feel heard and that they're not crazy, they're not too much. That's huge. So validation is one of the steps in our LUFU process. And again, both partners have to be committed to giving this to each other. And when I feel finally heard and understood, it's like, cool, it's your turn now.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, okay, now I'm willing to hold the space. But once you've been heard, it's just like your heart is like wide open and you're willing to do that. So it's being present and willing to really hold that space for each other. What about when you keep showing up in that way, but people have a fear of kind of losing themselves in the relationship?
Yeah. I mean, it's a common fear, is losing oneself in the relationship. It was certainly my fear, which is why I kept women at bay for so long. It was like, I don't want to feel trapped. I don't want to feel engulfed. And I don't want to feel like I'm going to lose myself. I want my freedom here. So that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So again, I want to talk to my partner about that. Hey, honey, I just have this old, deep fear in me that if I really go for it, if I really commit here, I'm going to lose myself. You're going to swallow me, or I'm going to lose myself and get lost here. And I've done that in past relationships. And, you have to be an astute student of yourself and how you show up in relationships to kind of see that coming and to even identify that might be a pattern of yours. Because usually that's a pattern someone has that they're bringing into a relationship before this relationship even started.
Mm-hmm. And I love one of your points.
Something with mom and dad, or, an earlier breakup that we had that was super painful. But understand that you can be in a fulfilling relationship and be two separate sovereign human beings. Most people that lose themselves are coined kind of codependent, or they're in a relationship that's one way, that's not mutual. And I think at the end of the day, that's what people are afraid of, is I don't want to give myself over to this relationship and not get anything back and disappear and not have it be reciprocal. So that's painful if you're in that,
Absolutely. And one of your other really wise tips from common relationship mistakes is, I think how you put it, is not working on it like a beast, as in not working on your relationship. So what does that look like? I mean, as far as like, oh my gosh, am I just like putting too much time into this? Is there such a thing as too much time, into your relationship, or should that just be like your main priority? I mean,
right.
I even know with my husband and I, when we're great, it's like cloud 99 million, and then if we have a disagreement, you feel like you've got a dark cloud there,
Yeah. I mean, I take the view that relationships, intimate ones, take work. And just like a garden, you got to go out there every few days and pull the weeds. And sometimes you don't want to do it, of course. You want it to be easy. You want it to just miraculously grow and just have it be magic and all this organic fruit and veggies that are just perfect. But that's not how the world works. Nothing's like free like that. Usually good things come with effort, and then the sense of accomplishment is greater in our own hearts when we've worked for something. So I just want people to understand, like, embracing the work, quote, the work is an important mindset to have in long-term partnership. It just is. And so it makes it easier to do when you embrace it and you're not expecting it to be easy. So that's the first thing. And then answer your second question of like, how much is like too much work? Is there such a thing? Yes, there is. And it's with couples who are stuck. Couples who are stuck and they're at an impasse tend to go around in circles about the same issues. And those couples may or may not get outside help. Sometimes it's really important to get outside help from a relationship coach or a therapist or a guide. Go to a workshop together, something to get out of this myopic way of seeing it and into a bigger perspective can be extremely helpful to get unstuck. And sometimes usually what I see in this example where it feels like too much work is one person's doing the heavy lifting, trying to work for both parties. And that usually leads to burnout and exhaustion and resentment.
Yeah.
And that's when it's doing too much. You're schlepping the load for the relationship more. It doesn't feel equal. It's not mutual anymore. You're doing most of the work, and that's supposed to burn you out. So trust that feeling and say something about it and stop doing your pattern of overworking in the relationship.
Yeah, and I suppose for some it might be that fear of, well, if I stop working on it, is it going to dissolve? Will it not be there anymore? And I suppose you would get your answer that way too, right?
That's right. I mean, a lot of people make it their goal really to change their partner, to try to mold them into what they want them to be. And again, this leads to a very unsexy, unsafe, challenging relationship that will eventually die because it's not sustainable. You can't, and it's not love. Love isn't trying to change someone every day. That's not how it works. So that's often a person's, again, they're in a childhood pattern that needs to be changed. And usually they're so focused on the other person and what they're doing wrong that they can't see their own shit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I mean, this is amazing. I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I'd love to just ask a couple last questions. What are top 3 tips that you could suggest for someone to really kind of, before they kind of are working in relationship, just within themselves? What are 3 things that you felt were just powerful medicine for you to really open up your heart and to be willing to fully commit?
Yeah. I'd say first and foremost, be a student. I'm guessing your listeners are students. And by that, I just mean be willing to learn and humble yourself and be coachable around relationships. That stop relying on outdated information about relationships and how they work. Stop buying into movies and romance novels and bullshit. It's just not how they work. And get in touch with reality and be willing to learn how they actually work. So being a student and having that mindset is number 1. Number 2, I'd say learn how to be with your own pain and your own experience. Joy, sorrow, grief, anger, rage, hurt. Being with your experience was something I didn't know how to do until I started meditating. And then I learned how to be with myself, and it was revolutionary because it opened up a whole new world. But prior to that, I just would medicate, drugs, alcohol, extreme sports, and anything to run away from my experience. So number 2, being with your experience is vital. And then I'd say number 3 is find a relationship. If you're single or in a partnership, it's just find someone in your life that will give you honest feedback and just have a conversation with them if you feel safe enough and just say, look, I want you to give me brutally honest feedback about how you experience me. And I just want you to not hold back. I can take care of myself. You don't need to sugarcoat anything, and give it to me because I want to grow and I want to learn about myself. And I can't always see myself very clearly because I live with myself 24/7 and I sometimes have blind spots. I don't see them. So give it to me straight, give it to me honest. Like, what do you got? And if 3 people in our life say the same thing, then we've got an issue that it's probably worth looking at.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wise words. And one question I was going to ask is if there was a book, because this is not something we're taught in school, and hopefully we're being taught it at home. I do the best with kids, but I think it's really modeling, and they can witness you even just working through conflict and, the respect and honoring and listening to each other. I mean, that's how they ultimately learn. But if you had to put a book in all the schools, and in saying that, I think you already have a youth program started, but if there was a book, and I feel like there's quite a few books within you, what would that book be?
Yeah, well, if it was young people, I would give them my book, The Smart Couple Quote Book, only because it's easy to read and you can flip to any page and learn a few very quick tips about relationship that are really cool. And then my next recommendation would probably be Stan Tatkin's new book, We Do, because it's a great book for people that are just about to get into a relationship or that want to kind of upgrade their current relationship. It's sort of his comprehensive book on, he was going to write it initially for a premarital sort of book, but now it's really for anyone that wants to, like, okay, let's do this from start to finish. And it's really about secure functioning, his work. So if you like that frame, I think that book's great. For teens, I'm not sure that would be the book, but I'd probably give them more of a, which I'm not thinking of in this moment. It's a good question. I'll have to sit with that one.
Well, thank you. And last question is thank you for the amazing, amazing work that you do in the world. You are so brave, and it is so, so needed. So thank you. And my question is how may we serve you in this moment?
Yeah, well, you could subscribe to my podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. It's called The Smart Couple. We have over 200 plus episodes with the best in the world on relationships, as well as just conversations between my wife and I, and then little rants that I go off on by myself. So I think it's a great place to start for people. And again, there's lots of other resources there. We have free trainings, and we have a 9-month training. We train relationship coaches. We do a lot of things to reach our aspiration of reaching 10 million families and 1 million youth. So that would be probably the place I would send you, and just ask, go check us out.
Thank you. And what's next for you? What's the next big thing that's happening with you?
Yeah, good question. I'm writing a book this year. That's the big goal. So it'll be my second book, and it's going to be good. It's going to challenge me in all kinds of ways, and to just continue to grow our team here at the Relationship School so that we can serve more amazing people like you and your community, and we can really get our message out to the larger world. Because we really believe that, man, if the world could learn how to work out their differences, if people could learn how to do this, what kind of world would we live in? And I think it would be pretty great.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Thank you for being here today. And I will definitely share your book and podcast and the Relationship School and everything in the show notes. So thank you for being here, Jayson.
You got it, Amanda. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now I would love to hear from you. What did you learn in this interview that you feel that you can bring into your relationships in a really tangible way? Perhaps you have other amazing tools that you'd love to share, as you might have a little gem that really speaks to others.
Thanks, beloveds, for joining us today. Please come over to theamandacons.com to continue the conversation and get access to all my podcasts, blogs, and videos. Did you enjoy this podcast? If so, please subscribe to the Amanda Cons podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. Feel free to pass this podcast on to your friends. That helps us get incredible guests to share their secrets for an inspired and joyful life. If you want more great resources, come over to amandacons.com and join my mailing list for all my latest content. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, I'm sending love